Happy Sabbath to everyone, and welcome to our meeting here online today. It's good to see so many people present with us. It's an indication that we do cherish the times that we have together, and we give God praise for us enabled by Him to uh, have this privilege of Zoom. You know, years ago, others, if they were not able to attend church, that was it. But here we are, despite what is happening around us. And this is actually a national problem. There are many different states are experiencing or expecting very horrible weather over the next few hours and days. So may God be praised and honored and glorified that we can come together under such circumstances and not even have to think about what is happening around us. It's as if God has placed us in our own little sacred cocoon where we can worship Him in spirit and in truth. You know, the Bible clearly outlines to us those things that are important to God. And that's where we gain our knowledge from. I'm going to spend some time with a few Bible chapters and references dealing with the subject of idolatry. And we may tell ourselves, well, that really does not impact me today because I don't worship idols. Well, maybe you think you are not worshiping idols, but we still have a lot of idolatry in God's church in these last days. And this is bringing the same reaction on the part of God towards his people. It happens even on an individual basis. We can have different idols that we cherish, and we don't realize that they can cause us to lose our souls. So we'll delve into the subject and look at it from the very beginning of time and bring it down to these last days to enable us to ensure that we don't fall under the same condemnation as God's people did in times past. Let's start by opening our Bibles to the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 20, and we will look at verse 3. Exodus chapter 20, and we will look at verse 1 to 3, actually. Exodus 20, verses 1 to 3. And I want us to listen carefully to this command that God gave his people from the very beginning under the direction of his prophet Moses, so that they will understand that this is a direct command from God. He has placed it within the commandments themselves. If we look at the first commandment, it says, "And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me." That's the first commandment. God is making it clear that he will not accept any other God before him. You know, we just studied in our Sabbath school lesson concerning Nebuchadnezzar and the fact that he had come to recognize and acknowledge that the God of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, was the God of all other gods and the Lord of kings and the revealer of secrets. And he discovered later on not just the revealer of secrets, but he is also capable of delivering his people from dire circumstances. He can do anything. That's the God that we serve, brothers and sisters. We serve the God who can do anything. We can find ourselves in any situation and he could work a miracle and take us out of it. While Jesus was here on earth, he worked miracles and healed some of the worst diseases and sicknesses that existed in his time. Leprosy was considered one of the worst, and rightly so. It really destroyed the human being physically, emotionally, mentally. It was very, very serious. And socially, they lost the ability to communicate with others because they were considered unclean. But the Lord delivered. He showed that through his power, he can solve any problem. And all he asks of us, the first, which is one of the most important commandments, thou shalt have no other gods before me. No other. So whatever can be identified as a God, the Lord is saying, don't regard it higher than you regard me. Nothing and no one. Don't regard anything, person or thing above me, regardless of who it be or what it is. And then the second commandment, reading from verse 4 through 6. Notice what it said. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Idolatry leads us down the path of hating God. When you choose something or someone above God, that person becomes your love. And God becomes just somebody else. And in some respect, even your enemy. Because what he asks you to do, what he asks me to do, would usually be contrary to what I want to do or what others want me to do. So we are led down a path by Satan where we can show God he's not important to us and that we even hate him. And that's how he sees it. And he's telling us you cannot have any other God, even in the form of an idol. So, in the first place, he tells us no other God. And that could encompass, as we will see as we go along, more than one thing. But he emphasizes in the second commandment idolatry, that we are not to make any graven image or any likeness of anything in heaven or on earth. And yet we live in a time when people still worship the sun, the moon, the stars. In some religions, these are gods. I know when I went to India, if a cow was crossing the road at the time when you were driving, you got to sit there and wait for that god to get across because they still regard cows as gods. So we have to be careful that we don't think that we have passed the heathen age. We still have heathenism in the planet, on this earth, and God's command still applies. So, what makes this important is that throughout the Old Testament, ancient Israel even committed idol worship. And we don't sometimes maybe recognize to what extent God's people went in idolatry. One of the commands that Moses gave, let's go to Leviticus chapter 19. Leviticus chapter 19. And listen to this command that God gave to the children of Israel. And we're reading from verse 1 through 4 of Leviticus 19. And the emphasis is on verse 4. Leviticus chapter 19. And we're reading from verse 1 through 4. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say unto them, Ye shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Ye shall fear every man his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. And notice that word fear means revere or respect. He didn't say idolize them. He said, Thou shalt fear or respect or revere them, regard them highly, but not to the extent that they become your gods. Because you cannot have any other God before him. God is not joking about this. Because you see, no human being, no animal, no stellar body, nothing can save us but God. Nobody can give us perfect advice all the time except they get it from God. So we might as well go to God ourselves and directly and ask him for guidance and direction. And when we see the Lord leads us to go to others, we need to make sure that the counsel and the advice that is imparted is in harmony with his word. That's why we have to all study for ourselves to know whether we are hearing the voice of God or the voice of men. But again, look at verse 4. Turn ye not unto idols, nor make to yourselves molten gods. I am the Lord your God. So God was very upfront about it. I am your God. I am to be the God of the chosen people throughout all the ages. And that means even now. If we consider ourselves to be God's chosen people, this command must be obeyed. And as we see, we are just looking at the first two commandments. And the first one was clear that we are to have no other gods. The second one is dealing with the fact that God saw that throughout the ages, idolatry of things or idolizing things or images that are to replace God or are being erected specifically to replace God. He says he will have none of it. None of it. I want to read how far Israel went from time to time. I'll just read one particular account. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 21. 2 Kings chapter 21. I want us to see what happened in the time of Manasseh, one of the kings of the people of God. Chapter 21, and we will read from verse 1 through 6. 2 Kings 21, verses 1 through 6. Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 50 and 5 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hephzibah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, after the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. So, despite the fact that God had delivered his people from their enemies, etc., this young man's advisors, which in that time, in the early stages of their reign, many times they depended upon the guidance of their parents. But the Bible is telling us that he didn't get good advice even from his parents, much less from the other counselors and helpers. He did that, the Bible said, that was that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. So he went into that direction. And notice he reigned for 55 years, the Bible says. I mean, after he got on the throne at such an early age, he reigned for 55 years. You would wonder, why didn't the Lord move him? You know, we have to be very careful. Sometimes the Lord allows people to live longer to reach them. We think that they should be removed or they should die. But God may have seen possibilities in this young man and tried and tried and tried to influence him through different other sources other than those that may have been closest to him. And God, I am sure, brought others into his life to try and lead him in the right path. But he chose to do that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. Let's read of some of the evil. Verse 3. For he built up again the high places which Hezekiah his father had destroyed. So he didn't even follow the good example of his father. And he reared up altars for Baal and made a grove, as did Ahab king of Israel, and worshiped all the host of heaven and served them. This is someone who was brought up in the knowledge of God, but yet he chose to defy the God of his fathers. And he worshiped false gods and served false gods. And when you read that word serve, it gives you the indication that there may have been even communication of evil spirits coming in the form of these gods, telling them what to do, guiding them in the wrong direction. Plus, they offered unto them idol foods, or foods that were set apart specifically for the idols, and they did things to honor them, have special festivals for them. They really treated their gods as though they were real beings. Verse 4, and he built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord said, in Jerusalem will I put my name. So he went even to trespass by polluting the sacred precincts of the God of heaven himself. This is total rebellion. And, unfortunately, we may say to ourselves, oh, that's abominable. I would never do that. But we have to understand that when we disconnect ourselves from God, as simple as it may sound, we open ourselves to Satan, and he inspires us, and we believe him. The Bible tells us, to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants you are, to whom ye obey. So we may think it is impossible for us to do like Manasseh, but once you break God's laws or you disobey God in small areas, doesn't have to be big areas. Once you do something that disconnects the connection that you had with God, you open the door for the enemy. And that's why it's so important for us to run back to the Lord as soon as we catch ourselves and keep strengthening and reinforcing the relationship with Him so that the enemy cannot slip in and take control of our minds and our lives from that point onward. Verse 5, and he built altars for all the hosts of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord. In the two courts? This guy went really berserk, so to speak, because he really showed no respect for the true and living God. It's like all that he heard God had done for his people in the past, or all that God had made himself manifest as capable of doing, he did not even regard that as important. We may think that Nebuchadnezzar's rejection of God's will was bad, but this is one of God's chosen people we are talking about here, not a heathen, not someone who was ignorant of the will of God. We just read the first two commandments, and they are both very clear. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, and thou shalt not take unto thyself any graven image. Nothing, the Lord said, not in heaven or in earth, must you worship anything that is intended by you to replace me. And he even built altars to the host of heaven, the sun, the moon, the stars, as if they were living beings. And finally, in verse 6, it says, and he made his son pass through the fire and observed times and used enchantments. And so we're getting into real witchcraft now, and dealt with familiar spirits and wizards. He wrought much wickedness in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. So he had time to repent. 55 years of rule. He had time to repent. But instead of returning to the Lord, he moved further and further away. And once he opened himself up to witchcraft, spiritualism, Satanism, all these familiar spirits communing with him, he received his guidance and his direction from the wrong source. He was getting it from Satan instead of from God. So these are examples of idolatry in Israel in the past. But I want us to take a journey into the New Testament era. I want us to see that God still had to instruct his people in regards to things that they may have taken lightly in the New Testament time that were not to be taken lightly. Let's go to the book of Corinthians, and we're going to study this book, 1 Corinthians chapter 8. And there's a reason I want to share this with you. You know, I had an experience years ago. Uh, I went to a country, and I was sharing this just last week with some of the brethren. I had gone to a country, and Dan and I, we knew that we were going to be encountering even national heathenism in that particular country. And we had a couple of other brethren that had gone with us. And we went to a particular place where we were invited. And when we got into the place, we realized that these people they were not Christians. They were into idolatry, basically. But anyway, um, after they had their little get together, they invited us to eat and so forth. And we went ahead and we ate, and they were so happy to see that we were willing to spend time with them. They were I think, surprised that we would have done it because I think they recognized that we were Christians and that we were not of the same religious belief as them. And we saw that the step we had taken, the individuals who were with us, they had a problem with the fact that we were so calm and comfortable around these people. But I want to explain to you why. Because you are going to have similar experiences in the future, and you need, I wanted to hear what I'm saying now. You need to know what the Bible's position is. You can't just go by what people say. You have to go by what God says. So you need to understand what the Word of God has to say on subjects of this nature, because Ellen White makes it clear that before the end comes, the Lord is going to carry out an enormous evangelistic work among the heathen nations. That means among the nations that worship idols. He's going to do a tremendous work, Ellen White says, and we are going to see a tremendous influx of these heathens into Christianity. So we have to know from the scriptures, because God does not leave us ignorant as to how to deal with these people. Because if you scorn people that God is trying to reach, you're, you have to recognize their blood could end up being on your shoulder. So you have to know how to deal with them, similar to how Christ dealt with them when he was here on earth. Because Christ did not reject those who were not of the Jewish faith. He related to them in a manner in which he could win them over. And so must we. But these chapters that we're going to look at will explain to you what the early Christian church was instructed to do along these lines. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 8. 1 Corinthians chapter 8. And we're going to read through this chapter because the whole chapter actually deals with the subject. 1 Corinthians chapter 8. And I'm going to start reading from verse 1. Now, as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. What is this telling us? God's people had a knowledge of his will. For example, we just saw God telling us that we are not to have any other gods before him, and that we are not to make any idols either. But he's telling us here now through the Apostle Paul that, yeah, we have knowledge, but we have to be careful because just having the information can make you exalt yourself in your relations or dealings with other people. What is needed, he says, is charity, because it is love that enables you to edify and reach other souls, not the knowledge. It's not just a matter of you preaching down to people and telling them what they don't know and making yourself look good and knowledgeable. No, that is not what is going to save them. You have to reach them through the power of charity or love. Let's see what he means by this. Verse 2, and if any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing yet as he ought to know. But if any man love God, the same is known of him. As concerning therefore the eating of those things that are offered in sacrifice unto idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is none other God but one. Now this statement he makes here in verse 4 is very important for us to catch. You may be invited to a place to eat food, and notice what he says, that was offered unto an idol. In your heart of hearts, you may know that these people offered. In other words, they may have prayed over the food and asked God to accept this food and bless this food, and the God that they were praying to was an idol. And I am sure he's addressing this because it was a situation that was prevalent at that time. I know in Trinidad, there have been special festivals and even weddings that may have been conducted by Hindus and, uh, um, and Muslims and people of other religions, and they will invite Christians to these occasions. And you may know the people, you may know the family very well, and they will offer you food, and you have to ask yourself the question, should I eat that food? Because I know they must have prayed to their idols about this food. Well, I want you to listen carefully to what the word of God says, because God's people are to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And as was brought to view here, um, as the apostle said, knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. Verse 4, notice what he said here. We know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there's none other God but one. We know that. That, unfortunately, we sometimes forget that. An idol is dead. An idol knows nothing. It's not really a God. It's not even a living thing. If we know this, why would you fear? Why would you fear? It can't do you anything. Your knowledge has to be the knowledge of God. You know that God is the true God, and every other claim of God is a false claim. So where is the fear? Verse 5, for though there be that are called gods, whether in heaven or in earth, as there be gods many and lords many, but to us there's but one God, the Father, of whom are all things, and we in him, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, by whom are all things, and we by him. Howbeit there is not in every man that knowledge. For some with conscience of the idol unto this hour eat it as a thing offered unto an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. So a person who goes ahead and they eat this thing, they are troubled because they say, well, this is an idol. But that is because in their mind, they see the idol as though it's a real being. And it is not a real being. And that has to be clear to us. Verse 8, but meat commended us not to God. For neither if we eat are we the better, neither if we eat not are we the worse. In other words, it's not doing you anything. Whether you eat it or you don't eat it, it's an idol. As far as God is concerned, it is food. But meat commendeth us not to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, neither if we eat not are we the worse. But take heed lest by any means, this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to them that are weak. So you may have brethren who they don't understand this. They don't see it in the context of something that cannot harm them. And as a result, they are affected if they see you eat. If they see you eat, they could end up thinking that you are worshiping an idol. Now, if they are of that mindset, then you avoid eating. If you don't know beforehand that they are of that mindset, that's one thing. But after you discover that that is their mindset, then you avoid them sinning by thinking that you are sinning. This is what the apostle is telling us. You don't want to be a stumbling block to anyone. You want to make sure that the position you take is based upon what is best for all concerned. So a person may be unaware of the view of scriptures concerning the fact that the idols are nothing and that they are not living beings, and therefore, whether you eat or you don't eat, it really doesn't matter because you're not really worshiping something that is living, something that is alive and real. But if perchance you recognize that that could affect a brother or a sister, then you avoid it. In our case, we had no idea that these individuals may have had this fear until we ended up discovering afterwards that they had a fear that uh, what was being partaken of was really offered up to an idol. Note verse 12. But when ye sin so against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, ye sin against Christ. So notice the scriptures is referring to their outlook as being a sign of weakness, because the weakness is based upon failing to keep in mind that God alone is the true and living God, and any other God is just stone or wood or whatever else it may be made of. But even though they may be weak in the context that they don't remember this or even recognize this, it is unfortunate that that they do, but it is necessary for us um, to bring it to our own attention that it could affect this individual, so you avoid it after you find out that that is their mindset. Let me go back over verse 10 and 11. For if any man see thee which has knowledge sit at meat in the idol's temple, shall not the conscience of him which is weak be emboldened to eat those things which are offered to idols? And through thy knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died? So yeah, you once you become aware of that person having problems along understanding the real status of the idol and how it relates in God's sight, then you act to suit. Um, if for example, if the individuals you realize that they have a concern in regards to the partaking of foods offered up to idols, then don't bother to partake of it. Don't bother to partake of it. It's unfortunate if you have already done it and then discover afterwards that they have that problem. Yeah, we oftentimes think that people may have the same knowledge or understanding that we have. And unfortunately, you discover along the way that that is not the case. But if you are aware ahead of time, then you avoid causing a brother to sin or to do something that in their own hearts, their conscience grips them into thinking that this would be wrong because of their misunderstanding of the subject of idols in relation to the true God. Verse 12 and 13, the last two verses says, "But when ye sin so against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against God." So if you do it deliberately after you find out where they stand, then the Lord is saying, then you will be wrong under those circumstances. If you didn't know beforehand, that's fine, because then maybe they will come and they'll ask you, how is that possible? And you could explain to them why you had no problem partaking of the food. But if it is that you know ahead of time that they have a problem with it, then you don't bother to do what you know is all right in order to help them to not to sin against their soul. But the Bible describes it as a weak conscience. Verse 13, "Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the world standeth, lest I make my brother to offend." So God is showing the compassion we have to have with each other. Not everybody is at the same level of understanding, and you want to work with them where they are, even to the extent, notice this, even to the extent that you will avoid something if you know it will affect a person. We sometimes feel as though, well, regardless of what they think, we're going to just go forward. But yeah, if you know ahead of time, you avoid it. If you don't know ahead of time, well, you try to explain it to them so that they can come up to a thorough knowledge of the subject. Let's go to another chapter. Let's go to chapter 10 of First Corinthians. First Corinthians chapter 10. And this time we'll read from verse 18 to 33. And I believe the reason why the apostles dealt with these things so thoroughly is because, as I said before, it was an issue in that day. And since these are in the New Testament, we are going to run into these issues going forward. If God is saying that we are going to have to evangelize the Gentiles, that means we are going to have to interact with them, and we have to know how to deal with these circumstances, how to deal with them. If you are by yourself, you know that the food that is being presented to you is even if it was offered up to an idol. You may not have been told that, but you may assume that it was because of the environment. That assumption, if you just go ahead and follow the directions of God, that He is your true God and you worship Him, you can eat the food, the apostle tells us. But if you're dealing with others who do not understand and they may be weak in their understanding, then you refrain for your brother's sake. Okay, we're looking now at verse 18 right on to 33, and notice what we are told. And this is going to give us some additional information on the subject. It's not going to just repeat what we just read. It is going to enhance or strengthen the reasons behind what was said. "Behold, Israel after the flesh are not they which eat of the sacrifices, partakers of the altar? What say I then, that the idol is anything, or that which is offered in sacrifice to idols is anything? But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils, and not to God. And I would not that you should have fellowship with devils." Now listen carefully to the rest of this. "Ye cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils." So when they offer these things up, the devil is the one who designs idolatry. He brought that into existence to draw people away from the true God. So he's really the one behind it all. Verse 22, do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? All things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. Meaning to say, it's not always helpful just because you know certain things to just act on it without taking others into consideration. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. Let no man seek his own, but every man another's wealth, or another's well-being, in other words. Whatsoever is sold in the shambles, that eat, asking no question for conscience sake. So listen to where he's heading now with this. He's saying, look, if you go to the marketplace, because remember, ancient Israel did eat meats, but the Lord instructed them to eat clean meats, not unclean meats. So he's not expecting them to go and buy unclean meats. But you know, some of the meats that were in the market may have been meats offered up to idols. And hear what he says in dealing with that. Whatsoever is sold in the shambles, in other words, in the marketplace or in the meat place, that eat, asking no question for conscience sake. So you don't eat it if you find out definitely that it was offered up to the idol. But if you are not told that it was offered up to an idol, he said, eat it. Eat it. Why? Because you know the idol is nothing. The idol is a dead part of creation. Now, that is what we were told. Eat it. But you don't go start asking questions. So this meat you have here, did you offer it up to an idol? Because now if they tell you, yes, we offered it up to an idol, then you should not bother to eat it. So there's a difference in how we are to approach this. We are to avoid getting into the details because we know that even if it was offered up to an idol, the fact of the matter is the idol is not a true God. But because you have to set the right example, you avoid eating it. Because eventually, if it is that someone else who does not understand what you understand sees that, they can become affected. Verse 26 says, for the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. In other words, whatever God has allowed to be created, he has created it for a reason. And it belongs to him. If any of them that believe not bid you to a feast, listen to this now, because as I said, we are going to be dealing with people of heathen nations. If any of them that believe not, that means a non-Christian, an unbeliever, a heathen, bid you to a feast, and ye be disposed to go. In other words, the Lord impresses you that you should go or you desire to go because maybe you know the person and you want to use it as an entering wedge to reach that soul. Whatsoever is set before you, eat, asking no question for conscience sake. And that's exactly what Dan and I did. We knew we had to reach these people. So we didn't ask them, did you offer this food unto idols? Now, obviously, it was good food. It wasn't meat or anything like that. Because some of these heathen religions, they are very, very vegan and vegetarians as well. So we didn't ask them, did you offer this unto an idol? Because if we asked them and they told us yes, of course, for conscience sake, we would have avoided it, especially since we had others with us. But the Bible is clear. These are not my words, these are the words of God. If any of them that believe not bid you to a feast, and ye be disposed to go, whatsoever is set before you, eat, asking no question for conscience sake. But if any man say unto you, now this is a different scenario now, but if any man say unto you, this is offered in sacrifice unto idols, eat not for his sake that showed it, and for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. So we have to get this, brethren, we've got to get this clear in our minds, especially since some of us are going to be sent by God to save the souls of heathens. You have to know when to ask and when not to ask. The Bible says that there's a time for everything under the sun. You don't ask. If it is that you are on a mission for the Lord, you don't ask. The food is set before you, regardless of if you know those people are idolaters. Don't ask, did you offer this set of food to the idols? The apostle said, just eat it. Eat it for preserving your own conscience as well as for the sake of the individual that you are trying to save. Verse 29. Sorry, verse 28. I'm going to read that over. But if any man say unto you, this is offered in sacrifice unto idols, eat not for his sake that showed it, and for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Conscience, I say, not thine own, but of the other. For why is my liberty judged of another man's conscience? For if I by grace be a partaker, why am I evil spoken of for that for which I give thanks? Whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. So even though you personally know that this idol means nothing, you still take into consideration those who are weaker in their understanding and conviction in order to save them. But the reason why he says you can go ahead and eat it, it is because you know that this food, this specific food, it is being offered up to an idol. These people are not seeing this as being a stone or a piece of wood. To them, it is a god, but you know better than them that it is absolutely nothing. Verse 31. Whether therefore you eat or drink, or whatsoever ye do, do all to the glory of God. Give none offense, neither to the Jews, nor to the Gentiles, nor to the church of God, even as I please all men in all things, not seeking mine own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved. So yes, even though we recognize that this knowledge, this information, may not be understood by all involved, we have to make sure it is clear in our minds. And as he said earlier on, you don't ask any questions. You eat it because you know it is food. God is responsible for all his creation. It is his, he has provided it for his people. And in those days when they used to eat meat, even though they may have also purchased the meat from heathen peoples or heathen nations, he made it clear to them that they were not to ask any questions. Because once you do so, because it is God's food. He created it. It doesn't belong to the idol and it doesn't belong to Satan. It belongs to God. but for the sake of saving souls, you hold your peace and you eat with a clear conscience that this is food from God. He made it, and in those days, for those who were meat eaters, he provided it for their sake. And it did not belong to something made of stone or wood. It belonged and it was created by God, not those who were being thanked for it. It was directly from above. We need to keep this in mind because as we go forward in time, we're going to be confronting ourselves, being led by the Spirit of God uh, um, to other people of other faiths who we are to reach, who we are to try and bring into the truth, um, in order that we may have the privilege of serving God faithfully by introducing them to the true and living God in the end. I want to read a statement for you from the Spirit of Prophecy because we've got to translate these things in the context of different things that we can make idols. We can make, according to Ellen White, appetite an idol. We can make our homes an idol. We can make our jobs an idol. We can make anything an idol. An idol is anything that we place above God. In other words, we we do what is uh, considered best in our own eyes, even though we know we may be disregarding something that God would have us to do. It's like a person breaking the Sabbath unnecessarily. You know, if it is, as the Lord said, something happened to an animal, instead of leaving that animal to suffer on the Sabbath, you do what you can to save that animal. And it will not be breaking the Sabbath, even though it may involve work to save that animal. Um, Even our own personal desires or dreams can be idols. Our pride, self, our positions we could consider in an idolatrous way. We just have to make sure that we see ourselves uh, uh, doing all to the honor and glory of God and not really unto self. And I'm reading from, bring it up here. Counsels on Diets and Foods, page 47. Counsels on Diets and Food, page 47, and paragraph 3. Counsels on Diets and Food, page 47, and paragraph 3. Some are indulgent in lustful appetite, which wars against the soul, and is a constant hindrance to their spiritual advancement. They constantly bear an accusing conscience, and if straight truths are taught, they are prepared to be offended. They are self-condemned and feel that subjects have been purposely selected to touch their case. They feel grieved and injured and withdraw themselves from the assemblies of the saints. They forsake the assembling of themselves together, for then their consciences are not so disturbed. They soon lose their interest in the meetings and their love for the truth. And unless they entirely reform, will go back and take their position with the rebel host who stand under the black banner of Satan. If these will crucify fleshly lusts, which war against the soul, they will get out of the way, where the arrows of truth will pass harmlessly by them. But while they indulge lustful appetite and thus, listen to this, and thus cherish their idols, they make themselves a mark for the arrows of truth to hit. And if truth is spoken at all, they must be wounded. Now, notice in the reading it said, then we need to get out of the way. Now, getting out of the way doesn't mean that you leave the congregation where truth is spoken. Because then what it means is that you don't love the truth and you are running away from the very thing that could heal you and save you. But inspiration is saying that how these are idols. And it's not just in terms of food or that this is to apply. If food itself can be an idol, or anything that someone may teach us that may point out some wrong in our lives, and we decide we don't want it, what we are basically saying is that we don't want to hear the truth. We don't want the arrows of truth to prick us, to cause us to stop and think about our need for bringing our lives into harmony with God's will. And that's why we may close our ears. I've seen people come to church and over the years, and if they don't like to hear all the Bible Spirit of Prophecy information that is being espoused, uh, they will leave the congregation and go in the fellowship hall and stay there until the sermon is over. And I've seen that happen over the years. They don't want the truth. It offends them. But the truth is a sword. It is supposed to cut us to the point where we realize that we have a need. And once we come to recognize that need, then we go to the Lord in prayer. Then we go to the Lord in prayer. Because the Lord only wounds us in order to save us. He's not looking to destroy us. He's looking to help us, to enlighten us so that he could save us. That's what truth enables God to do, to save us. So, brethren, we may think that ancient Israel did horrible things insofar as idolatry is concerned, but anything that we put over God and his holy will, over his truth, over his divine revelations in regards to what he would have us to do, that becomes an idol, especially when we do it over and over again. Clothes can become an idol. How people dress, they know that it may be inappropriate in the sight of God, but they don't want to stop. They don't want to stop. And as a result, it causes them to make a choice of a God other than the true God. Because if that thing, it can be even cosmetics. People will, they feel as though that's the only way they could look beautiful. They have to put on the outward adornment. And God is saying, no, he wants us to come to him just as we are, simple, natural. Uh, um, yeah, sometimes we may need a little cream because of some blemish or something that we may have. That's fine. That's not necessarily for decoration. That may be for health reasons. But we need to be careful that we don't allow things to become idols in our lives, or even individuals to become idols. If we are to follow a person, we need to make sure that that person is following the Lord. Even the apostle said, "Follow me as I follow the Lord." So it's not that you cannot follow an individual, but you need to make sure that that individual is following the Lord. We would have had to follow Moses if we were living in the days of ancient Israel, because God made Moses his mouthpiece, and Moses was leading his people in the direction that God would have them to go. Otherwise, they would never have crossed the Red Sea at all. So the important key here is that we need to make sure that we are choosing God's will above men's will or man's will or even self's will. Our will placed above God's will becomes an idol. And we have to therefore make the right choices. Otherwise, we've got to realize that God has others that he is also preparing to do his will. And he's given us the opportunity to be among that fortunate few that will eventually make up his kingdom church, his pure, undefiled body of believers who will become his everlasting kingdom, starting here on earth and then connecting up with the heavenly kingdom. I just want to read two last references. One of them is taken from Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 through 16. Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 through 16. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on an hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. This is our theme for this year. Let your light shine. The Lord is calling us to be lights in this world of darkness. That means we have to connect up to the light. Jesus is the light of the world. He is also the Word. So when we fill ourselves with his truths, the Bible and the spirit of prophecy, then we have light in us. If we follow that light, then we can lead others to follow that light as well. And that is actually the responsibility of all who take the name Christian. All of us, every single one of us has a responsibility to lead people in the way of light. What we studied today in regards to idols and the idolatry aspect of those different gods, because as I said before, you could have more than one God, but you can also have something that you worship, something that you place above God, and as a result, you worship that thing. You make it more important to you than the will of God and your own salvation. We are to be lights. We are to be filled with the truth, with the teachings of the Bible and spirit of prophecy. And as a result, God will be able to use us even in the future to lead many souls, including heathens, to a knowledge of the true and living God. The true God above all other gods is to be made known to others through the children of God. Last but not least, 1 Thessalonians 5:17, one of the shortest verses of the Bible. Pray without ceasing. 1 Thessalonians 5:17. Pray without ceasing. Brethren, it is my prayer that God will help each of us to be lights in this world of darkness, to be a part of his final people, his perfect, everlasting representation of his government in heaven here on earth. But we have to keep connected so that the enemy does not slip in and lead us away from the truth. If we are connected, then the Spirit of truth will remind us of the truth so that we can stay in the truth. May God help us to do everything in our God given power to not commit the sin of idolatry in any form.